Elon Musk. What drives you? What frightens you? And who are you, really? The world has 1,000 answers to who Elon Musk is, but that still doesn't tell us what drives him. So what are you really afraid of, Elon?
So let's unpack that. You're sure that humans will no longer be in control in 10 years' time?
I think it is unlikely, in the same way that if the difference in intelligence between AI and humans is vastly greater than the difference in intelligence between AI and chimpanzees, it's hard to imagine that the chimpanzees would be in charge.
Listen to Elon Musk long enough, and a pattern begins to emerge.
Because the intelligence would be in the data centers. Right. The robot's just the end effector.
He names a catastrophe.
Mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far.
He builds a system to stop it, and every system gives him more power to confront the next one. This is not a film about what Elon Musk wants to build. It's about the future he's building against.
One option, if we want to become a multi-planet civilization.
The first thing Elon Musk fears is not losing money. It's losing everyone. His argument isn't that Earth will necessarily be destroyed. It's narrower and harder to dismiss. As long as intelligent life exists in exactly one place, any single catastrophe can end it. A backup requires more than a flag on another planet. It requires a settlement that can survive if the ships from Earth simply stop coming. Musk describes the goal in terms larger than colonization, expanding what he calls the light cone of consciousness. He traces part of that pull back to childhood. Star Wars was one of the first films he remembers seeing in a theater, around the age of 6. He says it left him in awe. In 2001, Musk traveled to Russia, hoping to buy a rocket for his Mars greenhouse project. The negotiations failed. He returned, convinced that buying someone else's rocket would never make Mars affordable. He starts building rockets around a different assumption. The price isn't a law of physics. It's the result of how an entire industry designs, manufactures, and discards its machines. 2002, SpaceX, a warehouse in El Segundo, $100 million of his own money. The first Falcon 1 fails within a minute of leaving the ground. The second fails at stage separation. The third gets further than either, close enough that the failure stings worse than the first two combined. 3 failures don't just cost money. They cost belief, inside the company and outside it.
Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight in the way that you're developing it.
I was very sad to see that because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough. I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
And to see them casting stones in your direction. When you had that third failure in a row, did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever give up.
After 3 failures, SpaceX had enough money for one final attempt. On September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 reached orbit, the first privately built liquid-fueled rocket in history to do it.
I love you guys.
Less than 3 months later, NASA announces a $1.6 billion resupply contract. The fear that created SpaceX had survived, barely. And it survived by trading one dependency for another. A company built to save humanity from a single point of failure had just made itself dependent on one, a single government contract, keeping it alive with still no way to pay for the future it was actually chasing. Musk has said the Mars settlement he wants needs roughly 1 million tons of cargo before it's self-sustaining. One NASA check doesn't come close to answering the real question. How do you finance 1 million tons of cargo to a world that won't turn a profit for decades? Musk has pointed to that same underlying fear in his own words. posting, more than once, about what he calls a mouse utopian behavioral sync. What that actually means becomes clear later in this film. For now, staying on one planet isn't just a bet against disaster, in his telling. It's a bet against stagnation, too. Surviving the launch had bought SpaceX time. It hadn't bought it independence. Here's the problem NASA's contract didn't solve. Government money comes with government timelines. Budgets change, administrations change, programs get canceled mid-decade. Musk needed a business that didn't depend on anyone else's willingness to keep paying. Most orbital rockets still threw their most expensive component into the ocean after a single flight. SpaceX had spent years trying to land a booster back on a drone ship. The early attempts looked like a blooper reel. Close, then a tip, then fire. Close, then fire again. December 21st, 2015. A Falcon 9 first stage flies back to Cape Canaveral and lands upright.
Then I went back into launch control, and there was this amazing video of the rocket still actually standing there on the launch pad, or landing zone, I should say. So, yeah, I can't quite believe it.
A reflown booster costs SpaceX a fraction of building a new one. SpaceX had solved how to reuse a rocket. It still hadn't solved what that rocket would carry often enough to actually finance Mars. A cheap truck is worthless without constant cargo, so SpaceX becomes its own biggest customer. If the world won't generate enough cargo, build the cargo yourself, by the thousands. Starlink begins launching in 2019. 60 satellites at a time, stacked and released in a chain. Every batch does double duty. It's payload for the rocket business, and it's inventory for a new one, satellite internet. A subscription that funds the next launch, which builds the next batch of satellites, which sells the next round of subscriptions. The truck had built its own cargo, and the cargo was now paying to build more trucks. By the mid-2020s, Starlink had become one of SpaceX's central businesses. No longer just cargo for its rockets, but a recurring revenue engine of its own. So Amazon, trying to break into the exact market SpaceX had just cornered.
From an Amazon perspective, let alone a customer perspective, we want lots of connectivity. So more power to Starlink and SpaceX and anybody else that wants to try to pursue this. But I also think we want to be successful, and I think there's room for plenty of them.
Has to buy Falcon 9 launches from SpaceX to get its own rival satellites into orbit. SpaceX had become so dominant in getting to space that even the company trying to beat it in space had to pay it first, just to compete. Musk had built Starlink, so Mars would no longer depend on government money. It made SpaceX something closer to a utility, the kind of infrastructure a country doesn't really choose to use, it just ends up needing it. February 24th, 2022. Russian forces move into Ukraine, and one of the first targets is communication. Within days, Ukraine's digital minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, appeals publicly to Musk on X. Musk replies that Starlink service is active. Terminals start arriving. Dishes, cables, portable power, carried into positions still under fire, set up by hand. For Ukrainian units, Starlink was not an abstract technology. It changed how quickly information could move between the people seeing the battlefield and the people making decisions.
Зв'язку немає. По всьому прикордоні мобільний зв'язок не працює взагалі. Якщо б не Старлінки, то я не знаю, я реально кажу. Завдяки Старлінку ми рятуємо людей.
An August 2025 U.S. Aid Inspector General's report, 5,175 terminals delivered. 1,508 purchased by U.S. Aid, 3,667 donated outright by SpaceX. The report documents Starlink sustaining civilian internet, government and emergency communication, drone operations, and artillery coordination, and separately flags the risk of terminals ending up inside occupied territory. June 1st, 2023, the Pentagon confirms a formal contract for Ukraine's Starlink services, declining to disclose terms. Not the only layer, a vital one. A personal decision Musk made in the first week of the war had become, 16 months later, a formal government dependency. The most controversial dispute concerned Ukrainian operations near Crimea. Walter Isaacson's original account, his later clarification, Musk's own explanation, and statements from Ukrainian officials did not describe the episode in exactly the same way. But the controversy exposed the underlying problem. A private communications network had become entangled with decisions about where a war could be fought. SpaceX drew a line. Its president, Gwynne Shotwell, said this.
They have expressed some concern about building weapons systems, but we're not doing that. We're providing space transportation capabilities.
By early 2026, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense says Russian forces are mounting commercially available Starlink terminals on their own drones. Kyiv responds with a nationwide whitelist, built in coordination with SpaceX. In a recent interview, the same tension gets asked to his face directly. Whether it's normal for one private individual to hold this kind of influence over how a war unfolds. Musk pushes back. He says he doesn't determine the outcome of the war.
Well, I'm not sure we're determining the ultimate outcome of the war in Ukraine.
Then the Pentagon learns its own version of the same lesson. During a U.S. Navy exercise off California, a global Starlink outage cuts communications to 24 unmanned surface vessels. It halts operations for nearly an hour, per internal Navy documents reviewed by Reuters. Musk built Starlink so his future wouldn't depend on governments. In Ukraine, governments discovered their future might depend on him instead. Starlink had shown what happens when a private company controls the network a war runs through. The next system Musk wanted to build wouldn't just carry human decisions, it might start making them. The chimpanzee comparison from the opening wasn't rhetorical. It was Musk's description of where he believes humanity may be heading. It's a brutal argument because it doesn't require AI to hate us. Chimpanzees didn't lose the planet because humans declared war on them. They lost it because a smarter species reorganized the world around itself, without ever needing their permission.
An overwhelming amount of artificial intelligence, meaning like in 10 years I would expect artificial intelligence to be far greater than the sum of human intelligence. Like far greater. In fact, I think AI may exceed the sum of human intelligence in around 5 years.
In 5 years?
Roughly 5 years is my guess. There really won't be anything that AI can't do better than humans, apart from being human, perhaps.
He's put a number on the risk before. The odds, in his own estimate, that AI ends badly for humanity. What's changed isn't the number, it's the tone.
Even if there was a stop button, we probably shouldn't press it. Let's enjoy the ride. Is I think my philosophy at this point. Because I mean, honestly, there seems to be just an inexorable.
That's not a man who stopped believing the danger is real. It's a man who's decided the danger can't be stopped, only ridden.
All roads lead to acceleration of AI. So then I'm like, okay, well, you can just sort of be sad about it or join the club, I suppose.
Here's the tension he never quite resolves. He believes intelligence itself may soon be cheap to manufacture and impossible to keep scarce. But when he describes the humans he actually trusts, intelligence isn't the deciding factor. He doesn't say whether a machine that can learn every human skill can also learn the one he says matters most. If Musk can't guarantee that humanity keeps control of artificial intelligence, he's tried over and over to at least control the company building it.
And I do think we need to be careful about the development of AI and make sure it is ultimately beneficial to humanity, that it's that the future is good.
The counterweight didn't stay his. OpenAI restructures, moves closer to Microsoft, and moves away from the nonprofit mission Musk says he funded it to protect. He leaves. Then he sues. In May 2026, a federal court dismisses those claims after an advisory jury concludes he filed them too late. The verdict didn't rule on whether OpenAI actually betrayed its mission. It ruled on a deadline. Musk called it a technicality and said he'd appeal. Out of that loss comes xAI, Grok, trained on a compute cluster called Colossus, fed in part by data from X, the platform Musk also owns. He'd tried to steer a system he didn't control. When that failed, he built one that answers only to him. In February 2026, xAI and SpaceX complete a merger, described by CNBC as the largest corporate combination in history, valuing the combined company at $1.25 trillion. Grok and xAI's AI operations are no longer a separate venture sitting beside SpaceX. They're now a formal part of the same company. This is the part of the story that gets lost in the rocket footage. Musk spent years warning the world that artificial intelligence shouldn't concentrate inside one company's walls. His answer to that fear was to build a company with rockets, a communications network, a social platform, and an AI lab, all under one roof, and all, ultimately, under his. The intelligence Musk fears escaping human control is the same intelligence he's promising will make human labor optional. Before that promise can become a social question, it has to survive a much older one: physics.
How are your companies going to be making money?
The most likely outcome is an age of amazing abundance. Anyone can have anything they can think of.
Musk isn't the first person to believe technology will make work optional. In 1930, John Maynard Keynes imagined that rising productivity could shrink the working week to 15 hours within a century. Productivity rose. Living standards rose. The 15-hour week never arrived. Technology delivered the output Keynes predicted. It never decided who received it or how it was shared. In a recent interview, Musk goes further than abundance. He says AI will soon handle most digital work better than people. In his own coding work, he already rates it above the majority of professional engineers. Physical labor follows the same path, he argues, as robots become AI's hands. Work, in his framing, becomes something closer to a hobby, comparable, he says, to growing vegetables in your own garden. Something people do because they want to, not because they have to. The interviewer doesn't let that stand unchallenged. What happens to the people who lose their jobs? And does this lead to revolution faster than it leads to utopia?
It will be a bumpy road. I think that the Treasury should just simply issue people checks.
That is the mechanism behind what Musk calls universal high income. Not basic, high.
These things were relevant in the past. They will not be relevant in the future.
A robot that builds a car for less doesn't decide who owns the factory. It doesn't build another coastline, another Ivy League seat, another hour in the day. Abundance in one category doesn't erase scarcity in every other one. But Musk's own posts complicate that promise. November 2025, 2 words, mouse utopia. March 2026, expanding to the stars avoids risk of a mouse utopian behavioral sink. He's pointing to a real study. In 1968, researcher John Calhoun placed mice inside a closed habitat with unlimited food, water, and nesting material, but finite physical space. The population rose to roughly 2,200. Then it collapsed, not from hunger, but from social breakdown as density climbed. Researchers still debate what, if anything, it proves about human societies. A mouse enclosure isn't a civilization. Musk invokes it as a warning that material provision alone may not preserve a healthy society. But his own universal high-income prediction assumes material abundance can liberate people from compulsory work. Placed side by side, the two claims leave a question he hasn't answered. What replaces compulsory work as a source of purpose, status, and social structure if material production becomes abundant? Before abundance can become a question about meaning, it has to become an engineering reality. And the machines meant to deliver it are already colliding with a resource no one has figured out how to manufacture for free: energy.
People should take this with a grain of salt to some degree, because this is just our best guess. So this is not a promise.
At a real SpaceX facility, an engineer walks through a reference design for an AI satellite. Musk calls it simpler than a Starlink satellite. The numbers escalate fast: 150 kilowatts, then a gigawatt, then 10, 100, his word, terawatts. Space is cold, but vacuum removes the two easiest ways to cool a machine: conduction and convection. Heat has to be carried to large radiator surfaces and released as infrared radiation, adding area, complexity, and mass that first has to reach orbit, which is where Starship enters. the bridge this entire fear depends on. Flight 13, the countdown. 33 Raptor engines, hot staging, the ship's own camera view of its satellite deployment, the inspection of its heat shield afterward. This flight wasn't proving Mars. It was testing whether the bridge to Musk's next empire can survive coming home. Because a future where money supposedly stops mattering turns out to depend on one of the most capital-intensive industrial systems any private company has ever attempted. The physics might be solvable. The calendar is a lot less forgiving. His calendar is almost never right. Falcon 9 came back late. It came back. Starlink scaled slower than promised. It scaled. Dragon carried astronauts years behind schedule. It carried them. Mars, so far, has not. June 12, 2026. NASDAQ. A SpaceX rocket climbs the building's facade. On stage, Jamie Dimon asks Musk the obvious question.
Why SpaceX public now?
SpaceX had funded its growth through private markets, government contracts, and its own expanding operations. Musk had resisted taking it public for years. Now he was choosing exactly that, on purpose. His answer isn't Mars. It's a ceiling, he says, is closing in on Earth itself. Outside of China, he argues, electricity generation has barely grown in years, and AI's appetite for power is on track to outrun what the ground can supply. His projection? Within about 5 years, more AI compute could be launched into orbit annually than exists across the entire planet combined. The offering was priced at roughly $75 billion before fees. 555,555,555 shares at $135 each, valuing the company at $1.77 trillion. The stock closed its first day up 19%, pushing SpaceX's market capitalization to roughly $2.1 trillion. Musk holds about 42% of the company's equity. Through a dual-class structure, he controls roughly 82% of the vote. The public was invited to fund the future, not to decide it.
Well, here we are in 2026. Let's see where we stand in 2036.
Elon Musk believes money may not matter in 10 years. Wall Street just placed one of the largest valuations in market history on his attempt to find out, for a bet he himself says isn't guaranteed to work. Elon Musk has spent 25 years describing futures most people considered impossible, and dangers most people preferred not to think about. He's been wrong about the dates, often spectacularly wrong.
Tesla car next year will probably be is about 3 years.
3 years.
Approximately 3 years.
Less than 2 years away from complete autonomy.
November or December of this year.
By the end of next year. We're talking maybe 18 months from now.
I'd be shocked if it's not next year, at the latest. I mean, it's looking quite likely that it will be next year.
But reusable rockets came back. Starlink built a near-global communications network. Electric cars became an industry. Artificial intelligence moved faster than many of its own creators expected. Maybe Musk's contradictions are not a puzzle to solve. Maybe they are the source of his power. America gave him enough room and enough capital to turn private obsessions into public infrastructure. Because his companies no longer operate at the edge of society, they carry military communication, they shape financial markets, they build artificial intelligence. They ask the public to finance a future that remains, by design, under his control. Every time Musk sees a future he can't accept, he builds a system powerful enough to change it. Every time that system succeeds, more people become dependent on what he controls. Maybe he's right about Mars. Maybe machines make work optional. Maybe intelligence leaves Earth before humanity finishes deciding what to do with it here. Or maybe these futures arrive later, differently, or not at all. The question is no longer whether Elon Musk believes his own predictions. It's how much of our future we're prepared to place inside them.